So welcome to episode 8 of the e-liquid ingredient log database thing. I can't really think of a decent name of, so I'll just call it everything. On the plus side, we have some fancy little graphics today. On the downside, I got a cold, so this probably will sound even more tedious than normal. So we created a number of tables, the last of which being to store recipes and recipe ingredients. And now finally we're going to move away from tables for a while because we can get to do some slightly less dull stuff, and that is creating forms. So we need a recipe form, and well, what will it do? What it's going to do is, first of all, it's going to allow us to enter new recipes into the database. So then later on we can say, go to that recipe and say, yeah, let's make a mix of this, and then we'll get to that side of the database. But first of all, we need some way of entering the actual recipe into the database. And this is what this form's going to do. Maybe the next day or so, we'll come back and we'll adapt it a bit so that we can also edit existing recipes. But seeing as we've got no recipes in there, the first thing we're going to need to do is add a new recipe. So to start off with, what we're going to do is just create a basic form of the recipes table. So to recap, here is the recipes table. It's got nothing in it. So if we select that and we go to create form, you'll see that we've got a very basic form where we could run it and we could type in a new recipe and give the name of the recipe. We can type in our target nicotine level, like let's say 0.3, and let's say 70% VG, other percentage no, we're not going to put any water with this one, so we're going to be looking at 30% PG, and then we could put some notes in down here. But you'll notice there's a slight issue here. We've got nowhere to actually enter the flavors, or we've said how much nic we want, how much VG we want, how much PG we want, but we haven't specified anywhere exactly what they're going to be, what ingredients we're going to use, what flavorings we're going to use. So let's undo this a minute and we'll close it and save it as a recipe underscore form. That'll do. And then we can go back to our little list of notes, and as you can see, we've got no ingredients. We sort of predicted that. Basically, one recipe has many ingredients, and that's why we split it into two different tables. So we have a one-to-many arrangement. That means for one recipe, we need to be able to display on that page potentially an unlimited number of ingredients. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new form for the ingredients, which we shall do by selecting the table, create, and what we want, rather than a standard form which is going to show us one record, is we want a form that's going to show us many records. In fact, it's going to show us as many records showing the ingredients that belong to the certain recipe that we happen to be looking at. So we select more forms, multiple items, and basically there we go. What will happen is when this gets populated, there'll be a whole list of ingredients. So we'll close this for a second and we shall save it and call it recipe ingredients form, like that. Then what we can do is, if we open up our normal recipe form in design view, we'll make a bit of space down at the bottom here, and we shall drag and drop the ingredients form onto here. And let's resize it a bit so it takes up a sort of more sensible amount of space. Now at the moment these are two entirely separate forms. If we were to run this, you can see that we've got the top here covering our recipe table data, and we've got this form here covering the recipe ingredients data. But as it stands right now, these aren't tied together. This will just list all of the ingredients in the recipe ingredients table, and this will list whatever current record we happen to be looking at, i.e. whichever recipe we happen to be looking at. There is no association between the two. So if we go back into design view and we select this subform, you can see that we've got some possibilities to link the two. So if we link the master field in the main form as the recipe ID, and in the child form, i.e. the ingredients, the recipe ingredient and recipe ID? Yes, they should match. So we join those two together, and if we go and view it, we're not going to get much of a difference. But if we now enter a recipe in, and let's call it recipe 1, and let's just put some basic data in here like so. We don't really need anything in there, and we stick an ingredient in. Let's call it, well, let's just call it VG for now. Let's put in some PG as well. Let's put in some cookie, and that'll do. So if we close this, and we'll need to save it because we've updated it, and we'll open it again, you'll see that it's showing us recipe ID 4, which is assigned by itself. It's showing us the data we entered, and it's showing us the ingredients, and you'll notice that each one of them has a recipe ingredient, a recipe ID, i.e. the match for that is 4. So if we now create a new recipe, and we'll call this recipe 2, and we can leave everything else blank, it doesn't really matter. And let's put in something completely different. Let's put in cracker, and let's put in pineapple, which sounds pretty horrible, but anyway. And we'll close that. We don't really need to, but we're going to. And you can see that we started off with the first recipe entered, recipe 1, and it's still got VG, PG and cookie down here. If we go to the next recipe, we've got recipe 2, which has got an internal ID of 5. It's got the 2 that we put there, and it's got the relevant ingredients associated with it. I didn't actually put any percentages in because, well, that's pretty easy. We could do that now if we wanted to. 2% of that and 8% of that. If we go back to the other recipe, let's put in 70% of that, 30% of that, and 2% of that. And we can switch between the two, and you can see that it's saving the associated bits and bobs with the right recipe. So actually that's pretty good. That's kind of getting our recipes in. There is an issue though, and the main issue right now is that this is just a free text box. We don't want to have to type in all of the ingredients all the time because there's no way we're going to remember them. So we need to change this to a drop down, much like we did on the ingredients form, where we can just click a button and go through the list of all the ingredients that are in the database and just select it. So that's what we'll do next, but that'll be tomorrow. Watching paint dry would be more interesting.